Alright, as I'm fitting the doors, the first thing I've got to do is I've got to make sure that I've got the right spacing around the door. So if you'll remember, when I cut the doors out, I used the plunge router and I used a 1/4 inch bit. So hopefully I've got a 1/4 inch gap all the way around because there's going to be some molding that goes in there and whatnot. So I'm going to go ahead and fit the door. Put this down here. Drop the door in. Here's a little tip, put a little tape on the door here so you can get it out of there without busting your fingers. And these are just some 1/4 inch pieces of plywood. I'm going to use as spacers to make sure that everything is lined up the way it's supposed to. Yep, that's a nice tight fit. So that's a 1/4 inch all the way around. Yep, that's 1/4 inch up at the top as well. Okay, so you can see I got a 1/4 inch gap all the way around because there's going to be molding that goes on both sides here. So, so the task, the trick, was trying to figure out how to get the hinges set so everything is straight, so the door will open so the hinges don't bind. And so I came up with an idea of making a jig to put the hinges on, and then using the jig to mount the hinges on, to drill the holes for the hinges in the panels. So I'll show you how that works. Okay, so here's the jig that I made. You can see it is right here. It's just a piece of the scrap MDO. So what I did was, the first thing I did is I marked a center line along this board. And this was before it had been cut. So I marked a center line, and then I took my hinges and I made sure, tried to make sure as close as I could to get them lined up on the center line. Now I had also figured out how far I wanted them from the ends and all of that, but I wanted to make this so it would be the same as what I want here. So I drilled the holes and mounted the hinges, and then I said, well, I've got to remember I've got a 1/4 inch gap here. So what I'm going to do is I would take this over to the table saw, and I made a saw cut straight along here, and I made sure that this was a 1/4 inch wider than what I was going to actually have over here. So even though there is no 1/4 inch gap right here, I take that into consideration as far as the distance from here to here. So there is a 1/4 inch gap in there. But I wanted these to mate up because I wanted to make sure that the hinges wouldn't bind, and they would open and close and everything would be aligned correctly. Now this is the same distance from here to here and here to here. So what this will do is this can sit up in here, and it gives me a good positioning. So what I'm going to do is I'll go ahead and take these bolts out of the back parts of the hinges, and then I'll push this board up against here and we'll mark for the holes. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Okay, I've got my screws out, so I'll go ahead and remove this piece. And I can move this back here, get it flush up against the board here. And this should position my hinges correctly. So got that all flush. And then I'll go ahead and mark. Okay, now the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to take a center punch, and I'm going to judge and try and get as close as I can to the very center of the hole. So I kind of check it on two sides here, and then punch. Get it centered that way, get it centered that way, and then punch. And I'll do that on the other hinge as well. Okay, now I've got everything marked and punched. Move this out of the way. Okay, now what I will do is I'm going to take a piece of wood, put it underneath here, and go ahead and drill these holes. Alright? I'm trying to keep this as straight up and down as possible. I've got a little gauge here on top of the drill. does tear it up a little bit on the back, but that's not going to matter very much. I'll show you why in a minute. Okay, now just because I'm kind of paranoid about this, I'm going to move my jig back into place and make sure everything's lined up. So that's good. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and do the other one. Now I've got these drilled out. What I'm going to do is go ahead and take my hinges, line them up, make sure that they're lined up okay, drop some bolts in. It's going to be fine, I think. And then make sure that it opens and closes. Yep. So I think it's going to be exactly what I want. Alright, I'll show you the next step. So here's the back side. This is the MDO. This is the middle panel. You can see where we came through here. Now what I'm going to be putting in here are these things. These are called T-nuts. And these T-nuts then fit down in here. And these spikes grab into the wood. And then that'll be a permanent nut. Now remember, I've got an inner skin that goes on here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to countersink these. And I countersink these using a Forstner bit, which looks like that. Now, I only want to go in a little bit. So I'm going to come up on the Forstner bit about 1/4 inch. And I've got a mark here because I've already done one. And I'm going to put a mark so I can see what I'm doing. Alright. Now because I've already got a hole drilled here, it makes it difficult to get this Forstner bit started. So I've just drilled a hole with the Forstner bit and a little scrap piece of plywood, and I put that over here and just basically make a bullseye with it. Put the Forstner bit in there and hold it steady, and then get the Forstner bit started. And drill a flat hole, just like that. So I do this on every single one of them. And then when I'm done, the T-nuts drop in here, they'll be banged in, they'll be flush, they'll be underneath the surface of this. So when I put this inner skin on, it completely covers it, you won't even know it's there. But it gives you a threaded hole to put your bolt in from the other side, so you're not having to use wood screws. Okay, now that I've got those drilled out, I'll go ahead and take the T-nut, put it in, kind of get it as flush as I can, and then I just got a plumbing part here that I had in my junk bin. Use that as a punch. Get that thing seated. There we go. Let's see how that's seated down in there. So I'll go ahead and do that with all of them. So there's my holes with the T-nuts in them. The next thing I'll do is I'll take my template, and I'll line it all up and screw it down just like it would store. Now you probably noticed that these bolts are sticking up a little bit, and yeah, I don't think it looks good either. So I'm going to try and get some what are called undercut bolts with undercut heads here, so they'll sit down in there, but I can maintain it as a 1/4 inch bolt. Now this one didn't go on quite as perfect as the other door did, but I think it's going to be fine. So I got a little bit of gap here, but that's okay because the hinges are lined up correctly, so it opens and shuts. So I just make sure everything is all tightened down. And then I'll remove these screws and we'll mount the inner door. We'll cut the holes for the inner door. Alright. So I just remove these screws here. Open my hinges up. Take that out. Alright. Now, grab my door. I'll take my door and drop it down in here. And then I've got my little 1/4 inch plywood shims. So I'm just making sure that I've got a 1/4 inch all the way around. We're very close anyway. And I do. Now, got my hinges like this. And then mark the holes, punch them, drill them, do exactly what I did on this panel. So I'll go ahead and start doing that. Okay, got those all drilled. Drop this back in here. Perfect. Looks perfect. So I'll go ahead and countersink the other side. Okay, all drilled out and countersunk. My T-nuts in here. And you can see they're all mounted in there good. I'll do the other ones. Okay, I've got the T-nuts all in and seated. I'll go ahead and put the door in now. Drop the door in. Get our screwdriver. Find some screws here. Okay, I'm going to double check my gap. Perfect. Yep. And voila, I have a door. That's it with that. And you can see how the T-nuts work. I think it's pretty slick.